Right, so today we have Mark Ward. How you doing, my friend? You okay?
Yeah, pretty good, thanks.
Good. Good. Right, so one of the first questions I normally ask is, what was your first computer?
First computer which I say we owned was the ZX Spectrum. It was probably the second computer I ever got a chance to interact with, but that was the first we owned. Yeah. Yep. Christmas Day, I must have been about. I was trying to work this out with my parents how old I was, and nobody remembers. But I must have been about 4 or 5.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, it was about 4 or 5, and of course, didn't really know what was going on really, except for it was a computer, and we were going to be able to play games. Yeah, I think I made another video before where like the first game I actually remember the first game I ever played on that, which was it Death Chase?
3D Death Chase.
Yeah. And I just remember that it was this thing of my, initially opening the box and not knowing really what it was, and then my brother realizing, because he's like 3 years older than me, so he's like, "Oh, it's a computer," and so yeah, and it was this whole thing of trying to share. As children, it was like, okay, well, I'll pick the game, but you get to play first. And so, yeah, he picked 3D Death Chase, and I played it first. And so it was just like, yeah, amazing.
Yeah, your brother older than yourself? Then?
Yeah, he's older. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, we were both really at that age, kind of into playing video games. I think a bit, but I think me more so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So was there any early consoles after that, or did you stick to computers?
Yeah, computers. So my parents always had this like philosophy almost of computers were going to be the next big thing, and they I'm from like very working class family, so
same,
yeah, and so it was this whole thing where, they'd rather, even if we were going to play games, they'd rather us have exposure to a computer rather than like a games console.
Yeah.
And so yeah, the only console sort of thing we had was a Game Boy, but that was when I was like must have been 11 or 12.
Yeah.
And it was one of these things where like me and my brother put together some money and we bought it from one of my brother's friends. And even then my parents were like, "Oh, you're wasting your money." Yeah. Beyond that I did get a few more consoles, but yeah, as a kid growing up, no, and it was computers. Yeah. And I think at that point it was, no offense to my parents if they ever see this, but I actually sort of think that the timeline, they probably picked up the computers towards the end of their lifetime, if that makes any sense. So it was like when we got the ZX Spectrum, I think they were already kind of advertisements for like, the next thing, which was the Commodore 64 or whatever.
Yeah.
Because I think we were on a very limited budget, but I mean, it was awesome. Who cares? When you're a kid, you get a computer. It's like, oh my god.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So was it Christmas? Did you say that?
Yeah. It was Christmas time. Like I said, I can't remember what year. When it was like mid 80s, early to mid 80s.
I was struggling when because the Spectrum was my first computer. And as I've said on a previous podcast, my dad bought me the rubber keyed one. I don't think it was for Christmas though. I think it might have been for like it might have been a combined birthday stroke Christmas. But it was dead on arrival when I had it.
Oh no!
Yeah, which is
brutal.
Which was just like worst nightmare. And he just
super excited.
Yeah,
no!
he basically just went back up to Woolworths, where I think he got it from, which was a short 10-minute walk from where we lived, and they got no more stock. But it was at the time where it was the transition between the rubber keyed and the plus.
Oh, the yeah.
So he just came back. He just came back with that.
Yeah, a friend of ours had the plus. Is it the plus 3, the one with the disk drive?
Plus 3 was the one of the last Amstrad jobbies. Yeah.
So a friend, that was the other thing. I think the reason why we got the computers we did at the time was we had this family friend who worked at the local university. Worked at Hallam, Sheffield Hallam, in the IT department, and so he was like. I think our family's first sort of exposure to somebody who's like a techno nerd. And so like they typically always had the latest and greatest. And so well, I don't know whether the latest and greatest is the plus 3 really, but I mean, disk drive back then, you could load a game in a few seconds rather than like 30 seconds to a minute. To a kid, that's like gold. So it was one of those things where I think we'd already had some exposure as kids to their spectrum, and so that's why I don't think I really identified what it was at the beginning, because it's like a small little rubber keyed thing. And of course it was just the box originally. It's like the black box with the like stylized like white outline, I think, with the stripes in the corner. Yeah, beautiful little kit. So cool.
It's a shame with the plus 3, because it was obviously technology that was before its time, really, because it wasn't properly implemented, and it was a great idea, faster loading games. It was like, oh wow, but I think it suffered with the fact that you'd already got a huge software library, tape wires, which you could swap with your friends, and do you want a copy of this? Okay.
I actually joke. Number of people I joke with saying like my memory growing up is like I actually don't. Well, with the tapes and things, I think when we were buying them, like I think me and my brother and I used to get like, I think it was like £2. It's like £2 pocket money each week, and like. In Woolies or WH Smith's, I think the games were about £2. Some of them were a bit more expensive, but most of them were about £2. And so that was what we would spend our money on. Like I would put £1 in, my brother would put £1 in, and just buy a game. But then when you, like you say, moving forward, where it's like Commodore Amiga style thing, it's always like, all right, who's got the latest games, right? And you borrow them, and things happen, which results in two versions of the same game. I don't know how the gaming industry made it, to be honest. Probably didn't very well.
Well, I think they did, but I mean, because obviously there was a lot of bedroom programmers. But obviously there's always somebody at the top, isn't there, who's going to be reaping in the profits, and obviously the game developers wouldn't have seen that much. Piracy wasn't going to help, but it gets the name out there.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it was definitely one of those things where I think as a kid playing the Spectrum, I don't think we really cared too much of a different developing houses or publishing houses, like I suppose.
There were certain key ones,
but there were, that's what I was going to say. Moving forward, when I got older, it was like,
it was like if Ultimate Play the game had got a new release, it was like I need that. Some of the ones I used to look out for were Gremlin Graphics.
Yes. Gremlin games,
and Houston Games, Melbourne House, obviously Ocean. They all had classics.
I'm not sure if you have the same thing. You've frozen on my screen.
Oh.
I have to do an update.
No.
I'm not sure if it's... you're good? Oh, it's fine then. No worries.
All good?
You're just frozen. That's fine. Don't worry.
Anything like that, we'll edit out anyway.
But yeah, I'm actually it's the same thing. Like moving, when I think a lot of my, I guess, gaming career, if you want to call it that, or like nerdism.
Yeah.
A lot of
What?
it is a lot. I don't know. A lot of it is in retrospect. I mean, like I as a kid I didn't really know what was going on, although I enjoyed playing the games and things. And then as I got older, I think that's when I started to really look backwards at some of the history. And it I didn't realize actually growing up that that's how a lot of the game industry started. Essentially, that it was people writing games out of their bedrooms and things like that, which gave me that extra appreciation. I'm like, oh wow, yeah, that's why when you some of these games, when you look at them now, the amount of people that actually worked on them, there's like 2 or 3 people.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, yeah, okay, development team, which is literally like one person.
Yeah.
Um, that's yeah, it kind of makes sense now,
Yeah.
but
It's
like that was a different time, like yeah, compared to now, I suppose.
it's a
Yeah,
realization when you look in some of the instructions, if you like, of some of the
yeah,
games, that
yeah.
you'll have one name, and they they literally were from a few miles away from you.
Oh yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, there's one game. Do you remember Sweevo's World? A game
Oh,
called Sweevo's World. It was like an isometric game in the style of the Batman games.
oh, I'm
Head
actually
Over
not sure about that one.
Heels. Remember Head Over Heels?
Oh, we Head Over Heels. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it was that style, but it was
Yeah,
called
yeah.
Sweevo's World,
Ah, okay.
and I think it was made by Gargoyle Software,
Oh,
and
right. Yep.
they were literally in Dudley, which is just a few miles
Yeah,
away
just
from me.
just next to you.
Yeah. But when you were a kid, you were just looking at it going, oh well, it's primary school
Yeah.
or whatever. It's like, um, but yeah, it's all those little
Yeah.
realizations when you looking in the
It,
instructions and
I mean, for me, so like, for anybody else, or for anybody who watches this, my accent is kind of messed up. So I'm actually from nearby Sheffield, but I can't retain my accent, so I just sound weird. But like right now, like I've lived in Canada effectively for the last 10 years. I did like a year in the UK. Sounds like a prison sentence. I did a year in the UK, back again. No, but the reason why I mention that is because what I found very interesting is again something else I didn't realize is that a lot of the computers which were marketed in Europe were not marketed in the US.
yeah,
At least not as much. Just completely didn't realize. And
yeah.
so when I'm talking about certain computers with friends of mine,
Mm.
they're like, oh, okay,
Yeah,
I'll take your word for it.
yeah.
Um,
Spectrum would be one of those, definitely.
yeah, the Amiga too, because mostly it was. I think the Amiga was one of those things where it was like, I don't know. I think I would I think I'd put it in a similar category as like the Neo Geo or Neo Geo, however you want to say that, like in
The
the
Neo
UK.
Geo console.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. Where it was like everybody, this was like a fabled console, but nobody knew anybody who owned one.
Well, it was
It's like that.
it was at the end of the day, it was a Japanese arcade machine in
Yeah,
your home.
which
The
is why.
cartridges were
Yeah,
this big.
yeah, yeah. Cartridge is like this great big like
Yeah,
suitcase.
yeah.
But yeah, and I think that was one of those things where everybody used to say like, oh yeah, this thing, but of course, yeah, it was not really a machine for the Western market.
Mm.
But it was still this like fabled thing which was out there if anybody knew somebody. And I got that impression talking to people because like people would always know about like the Commodore 64, which is obviously a massive thing in North America.
Okay.
Um, but specifically with the disk drive, not the tape drive. So again,
Right.
it was one of these weird things where you're talking to people and they're like, games on tape, what? Because I think they were either cheaper to produce here. I don't know. And people can correct me if I'm wrong.
Hmm.
Or it was just that the market, they thought that people had more money, and so they were like, yeah, it's cheaper to make a tape drive, so we'll do that in Europe. I don't know. I'm not sure.
So,
Um, but then
so
the Amiga didn't really make it. I mean, you could get them
yeah.
apparently. It just wasn't as popular. Most people went with the Atari ST.
Right. Okay. So that was
Yeah,
more of a thing. So
yeah.
I wonder what the competition was like in
Yeah.
Canada then? Because obviously when we were kids, primary school in the UK, it was you either had a Specky,
Yeah.
A Commodore 64,
C64.
or an Amstrad,
Yeah, yeah.
and then there was like playground rivalry, wasn't there? And
Oh my
mine's better than
gosh.
yours, and yours
Yeah,
has
my
got
God.
colour clash, and yours has got better music, and yours has got a green screen, and so
So actually, one thing, and again, it was like there was great comment made on the, I think it's is it the second, I think it was the second podcast which you put out there. We were talking about like the differences between like the Spectrum ZX and the C64.
Yeah.
And one of the things I always thought, and this is I think where my kind of attention to detail started to kick in when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I always thought, for example, that the pixel graphics on the Spectrum were better than the C64.
Yeah. Totally agree with that.
But
I mean, I would say that
colors,
anyway.
but as I'm saying, it's this really weird, like, kind of, the pixel graphics are better, but like the colors are worse. But then also some of the games did seem to be faster. And so then that was that whole discussion where basically saying like, well, obviously, I mean, I talked to you a little bit previously about this when I was looking at programming, making a Spectrum game, which it got as far as getting the engine to compile and things, but I haven't really looked at it ever since. Oops. Right. That's actually my problem. Normally, I start projects, I get super excited, I spend like a week looking at it, and then I get distracted by something else.
Well, I'm still waiting for your Spectrum video. So
yeah, and I have got loads of footage. Seriously, I've got like that little archive of footage, and I still need to get through it. Yeah. I still need to set. I'm not sure if I still need to send you the proof that I managed to beat more than the second level of Hunchback.
Oh man, yeah. That game. That game. Yeah.
Silly. It's totally silly. Yeah. But yeah, this whole thing of like, the way that it updates and the refresh rate, there's this little bit of latency which is in with the C64, which gives it this. I mean, it's not really sluggish, but it does give it this kind of slightly sluggish feel compared to a ZX Spectrum, which most people wouldn't notice nor care about.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that I always noticed. I was like, yeah, there's something different. Yeah.
But you see, my cousin had the C64, and I used to see my cousin quite often. Every couple of weeks when we'd do our typical Sunday family meetings.
Yeah.
Your nans, your granddads, and whatever cousins.
Yeah.
So I always got good use of the C64 then. And the main things I noticed about the C64 was obviously the keyboard. Had a nice keyboard to it.
Yeah.
The sound chip blew me away.
Oh yeah.
From day one.
Oh my god.
The SID chip always blew me away.
And it was again always... that's something. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt there.
No, it's okay.
But yeah, the SID chip is something which and again, it's a retrospect thing. Yeah. Like I always thought the music was great and the sound effects in general were great on C64. But it was only when I think I was driving somewhere. It was like so where I used to live in Canada is like a 7-hour drive to the experiment site where I also work. And we used to do this really long route and pick somebody up on the way and keep going. And this guy was very similar age, but then we were talking about retro gaming, and he gets his phone out and like plugs it into the car, and he's like, listen to this, and he basically starts playing some like almost like chiptune sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my god, this takes me back. This sounds like I'm playing like as Commodore 64 or something like that. And he's like, yeah, SID chip, man. Get with the program. And I realized it's like, oh yeah, there's just this one sound processor which is basically in so many of these systems, and it's got this quintessential sound. It's just
Yeah,
It's just good.
you either get it or you don't with that chip.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
I, I,
So
yeah.
good.
So it was the sound chip, and game wise, I always preferred the Spectrum versions. But where
Yeah,
one particular um, game category, if you like, where I thought the C64 was always better than the Spectrum, and that was the shoot 'em up games, because the
oh
scrolling
yeah,
was always silky smooth.
yeah,
Whereas a lot of when they converted certain games to the Speccy, they had to rely on flip screen. It
yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
until further on down the line where they found out techniques of making the game scroll. But it
yeah.
still wasn't as good.
So that's actually one of those interesting things where when I was looking into programming for the ZX, and it's got this very interesting memory structure, which is like three bands on the screen. It's like top, bottom, and middle, and it's not sequential. um, but then working with characters is really it's fast, but working with characters is really easy. Positioning a character on the screen, it's very very easy. But then single pixel movements of black dots is um I mean, it's something which a programmer you can think your way around, because it's all to do with memory addresses. You can think a routine around, which was very fast, but unless you actually write something which is usable, yeah, writing a smooth scrolling thing is actually not it's not straightforward. That's why when I was looking at it, I stumbled across this game engine which somebody had written to do exactly this. So you could do smooth scrolling of about 4 or 5 sort of sprites, which were like I think they're 4x4 kind of character. So they're not
Yeah,
massive,
yeah.
but yeah, you can do this smooth scrolling of a few things before you start to get like artifacts. Um, like I think it's like things start to flicker, and
Right. But yeah.
the lag slightly behind, this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, which again maybe gave me this whole appreciation of like people writing assembly back then who managed to do this. It's like so cool.
Yeah.
these
It's
these people were great. These were gods.
yeah.
Yeah.
The most I did programming was typing out the
Oh,
games in the magazines,
yeah.
and I once wrote a few little text adventure games.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh my gosh, it's
yeah,
interesting. I think
but
I
that
think
was it
that might
really, all in BASIC.
Yeah, I think that might be one of the in ways of many people programming in BASIC. It certainly was for me in programming. So, like you said about text adventures, like just the ability to do like a simple, choice and then
Yeah,
writing
yeah,
things. Like, yeah, that was I think as far as in programming that I ever got.
yeah.
Really as well in terms of a game. Yeah, was just a basic text adventure, which it would always get a bit complicated, but and that's when we would give up. Um, but I think that's probably the in ways for so many people in basic. That's probably most people's memories of basic.
I think
Um,
even the fun of creating a loading screen as well, and then getting
yeah,
all that on tape and just watching it all load up was just,
yeah.
it was
It's
quite magical, really.
it's kind of interesting because I think for me, it's interesting. You said, "Oh, you've got still got that list of Spectrum games," and you said about like your memories of playing games. You're more fond of the Spectrum rather than the C64, except for scroll ups,
Yeah.
shoot 'em ups. But it's interesting because like when I was making this list of games that I want to talk about, there was not that many C64 games. There's a few which I do remember.
Right.
There's a few which I do remember, and I certainly do want to boot up the MiSTer and play those, and I did for a few of them. Um, but I don't have as an extensive list, and I don't know if that's my memory is just poor. But technically, the Spectrum is earlier, so uh, That was my gin and tonic years. No,
Yeah.
But yeah, then it's like, so there's a little bit of a gap. But then so that's when we got the Amiga, and I think for me, technical computing wise, the Amiga was my first sort of inroads into that sort of thing, because we had an A600. So again, that places us like right towards the end of
the
when
A600. Yeah.
So we had the little sawn off A600,
Sawn off. I like
that. Which was a pain, because some of the games I used to really like flight sim games, and a lot of those used the numerical keypad, and so you were poop out of luck.
Well, some old games were incompatible as well with the
Yes.
Kickstarter. So you had. Do you remember the Relo kit?
Soft boot. Yeah. Used to do that for a few. Yeah, and it's funny because as you said about like doing a boot screen.
Yeah.
That's something else I remember actually of very fondly of growing up as well, is like and I think this was also mostly C64 games, where you would have like a game of Space Invaders or something like that, which would load up while your game is loading.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember. I was actually trying to remember games which did that, so I could see if those were still preserved in these archive files, basically.
That's you know what, I'd forgotten about that, because I know I know there was a lot of hacked C64 games where you had like an intro, and because when I was around my cousins, 9 times out of 10 we'd load up just part of that game just so we could listen to the music for the intro and not even play the game.
Yeah. Oh, actually, back on the SID chip, that was one of the things I remember, is one of the games which I really, really loved when I was a kid on the C64 was Kickstart 2. So it was like a side-scrolling motorbike jumping game.
Oh yeah.
I thought
it was a Codemasters game. I think that was.
I think so, yeah. And what I forgot, I completely forgot. The only thing I remembered was like the in-game music, which was this kind of cheesy do 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 do, like just kind of a cheesy tune. And then when I got it up on the MiSTer, and then the title screen loaded up, because I wanted to do rather than just fast loading straight into the game, I wanted to see what the title screen was like. And it starts playing this like just epic piece of music, and I'm just like, oh my god, the SID chip.
Yeah.
Oh my god, this is amazing. And then that took me on like a massive trail of like which games have got the best like SID chip music in them. Yeah, it's absolutely phenomenal. Yeah.
Oh, you just like, I was going to say, you just have to look at some of the artists like Rob Hubbard and David Whittaker, and there's some awesome musicians out there.
I think, like I say, when I first got really into sort of more of the technical side of computing, and so, well, when I say technical side, I mean I didn't do any programming until I was in university, but I would say like what I mean by technical side really is more like the difference between just turning something on and putting a disk in, and actually understanding a little bit more about what's going on.
Yeah.
So you're gonna laugh, because my really look into this was the game Settlers. So it's like that. It's like I guess it's a real-time strategy game, but it's very slow paced. So it feels like
I remember the name. I remember the name. Never played it.
Yeah, but so with that game, basically the way that they got it to run on different machines was that it would sacrifice features and sounds. Wow. So if you didn't have enough memory to support all the sounds, you'd be limited to like a certain amount of the sounds and map size. And when I went around to a friend's house and he had an Amiga 1200, and
very posh.
Yeah.
Especially back then. Yeah.
The cucumber sandwiches and Pims and cucumber sandwiches.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So and he had I think he had one with 2 meg. I'm not sure if they were standard, but he had a 2 megabyte one. And so I noticed straight away oh man, you can have bigger maps, and oh, this thing makes sound which doesn't make sound on mine. Like, what's going on? And then that's when I sort of had this thing where, I noticed in Workbench that it always tells you how much memory you've got left. And then I was sort of thinking to myself, well, that's interesting. So I noticed that my version of Settlers, which actually was one of the original games I had rather than a copy, but
Sacrilege.
yeah. So that would load into like a workbench, like a mini workbench environment, and it would show you how much memory you've got, and I was like, I wonder if I can get more sounds if I can make it straight boot into the game. And so that was when I really discovered. And again, I did suppose this was before I had internet or anything like this, so it was more like poking around. What's
early
if
hacking?
I open
That
it,
is.
yeah, if I open the shell in Workbench and put
Yeah.
the disk in, and then I look at what's on the disk and look at what it's doing during the boot up sequence, and there is a file on every disk called startup sequence. And I'm like, ah, ha, ha. Yeah. And so it was this whole thing of like, can I get it to boot straight into the game? And yeah, I basically made a backup just because I didn't want to screw up my Settlers disk.
Yeah.
Made a backup, and yeah, you could do it. You could boot straight into the game, and I could get more sounds. And so I was like dead chuffed for myself.
Right.
At that
So
point,
it fooled the programming thinking that it was on a different machine.
No, it just doesn't load up the Workbench environment. It doesn't waste memory. It just doesn't load the whole, I'm going to load a mini version of the Workbench and use like half 200, 300K of RAM.
So the program was just set to, if this amount of memory is available, then you can have all these goodies.
It'll just load up like the I can't really call it, but it's like the shell prompt or whatever, the initial thing, and it just goes straight into the game, rather than going like the shell prompt and then into like a workbench, a limited workbench. Yeah, so it doesn't load the Workbench graphical user interface with like the mouse and everything like that. It literally just goes straight into the game, and it saves enough to go. I think it's something like, rather than getting like 40% of the sound, you get 60. Or something like that.
It just makes you think, why didn't they?
Yeah.
Why didn't they do that in the first place? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that sort of thing really then spurred me on to like Workbench, and then it sounds really sad, but it's like, as like a kid who should be playing video games, there's me most of the time with my Workbench disks being like, okay, well, when I'm in Workbench, which programs do I typically use? And I want to be able to just optimize everything. So I ended up with like 2 or 3 disks which had like tons of stuff on, which was spread from like all the stuff which came with the Amiga, plus a bunch of other like word processing stuff which my parents which we got for school and stuff like this. So yeah. And I got a PC. I got a PC, and it was just like, I got a hard drive. Oh my god!
Look at all this space. Not restricted to 48K anymore. So, you've been messing around with the MiSTer.
I have indeed.
Is there a few things that you can show us or tell us about that little wonder machine?
Yeah. So again, I'm going to take it out, right? So this is a little 3D printed thing. Okay. So let me just take it out so I can show you this.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
Yeah. Hopefully not breaking anything. Yeah. So basically, again, this I think my interest in the MiSTer was really stems from, again, this whole sort of look back into retro gaming and things like this, because Amiga emulation, and I'd be like, oh yeah, I want to play some old game, let's say I want to play Cannon Fodder, but not like the PC version of Cannon Fodder. I want to play the Amiga version for some reason, because no, actually, okay, best one I can give you an example of Moonstone. So yeah, okay. Let's say I want to play Moonstone, yeah, you dig out the discs with your old kickstarts on them and things. And it would always feel, and again, this is mostly because I think trying to cutting corners, it would always feel like a faff. It would always feel like, you take ages to get things set up correctly. Yep. Certain games crash if you haven't got the profile set up in the right way, and you don't really know why, and some games work if they've got weird glitches in them, and you don't remember those glitches being there, this kind of thing. And so I was like looking at this, thinking, well, this is I really like the Amiga, but every single time I set myself up with an emulator, I I either get bored after a certain amount of time, or basically I I can't get it out. This is as far as I've got.
Hey.
So um I either get bored, or something comes in and it doesn't feel permanent, is the way, is really what I'm getting at. It doesn't feel like, oh, if I pick this up in another 6 months time, I'm going to know what I've got, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
um so um I might need some pliers. Yeah, this was my worry with this case. It fits a bit too tight. I made this case and a friend of mine 3D printed it for me, and basically it's like, because it's plastic, it's just kind of it's become a single piece.
Shrunk in the wash.
Oh no, it's not. I'm being silly. Yeah, I'm just sorry, everybody. I'm just.
You found an extra screw under
Yeah.
the feet. Under the feet, yeah.
Yes, that's indeed the problem.
It's all on video. That is, it's all on video.
Yeah. No, here we go. Such a professional. Oh wait. Yeah, so it would never feel permanent. It would always feel like, oh, these disk images are just whatever, and they get deleted, or I just lose track of where I am, and that's just I start again, and then the process restarts. And so I always thought, and it's the same thing for the Spectrum emulation and everything else. And I just sort of came to a conclusion. Yeah, it's emulation. It doesn't, for me, it does not. It's not got that sense of permanence. It's not got that sense of like what it feels like on the actual hardware. It's like you mentioned. Yeah, it's like you were mentioning about, like, the difference between like physical media versus like digital. And it's, I think it's probably a generational thing, but for me, that's what it is. It's like, I don't have the hardware anymore. I wish I did, for a lot of these machines. I think I've still got my Amiga, but it's my parents' house and it's got a broken keyboard. So and so yeah. So when I was like, and everybody would say, "Oh, Mark, just RetroPie, get RetroPie." And I think that's a solution for many people, because you've got the setup, it does one thing,
Works
it's all
well.
there, and it works.
Yeah.
But then I stumbled across the MiSTer. And one thing I actually liked about some of the emulation was the fact that you could be like, oh, I'm gonna emulate a computer which I never owned. I'm gonna emulate like an A1200 or an A3000 or whatever, and play a game in a way which it was supposed to be played, as opposed to playing a game with this like 5 frames a second kind of slugfest. Yeah, and that's where I came across the MiSTer, because basically I found an article and I read this whole thing about that you can run an Amiga 1200 using the Mini-Mig core, and it runs about 7 or 8 times faster than an actual A1200, and and this is like a screen grab of like a game on it, and it's like silky smooth, and I'm sort of thinking to myself like, oh my god, I need this.
Sold.
Yeah, and it took me a little while to really fork out the money, because I was like, well, it's a bit of an investment. It is a bit of a premium. I would say it is a bit of a premium retro gaming thing versus a RetroPie. Not that it makes it better. So people should not be like hating on this, saying, "Oh my god, how dare you!" But it is a little bit of a premium solution. But ultimately, I think what it does very, very well.
Good luck.
And so, okay,
Hey,
finally,
notice.
finally.
Okay.
Oh my god! So what it is in the board in the middle.
Yeah.
That's a FPGA board. It's a
Okay.
DE10 Nano, which is basically a board made for education. So it's supposed to be like a a beginner sort of FPGA board. It's got a bunch of it's got a bunch of GPIO on it and things like this.
Okay.
And it was born, as far as I'm aware, out of another project, the MiST project, which was kind of an extension of the Minimig project. It's like it was this families of projects where basically developers were like, "Oh, we want to recreate the chipset of an Amiga for an FPGA." So at some point in the future, this is true for many machines. No, these chips are not going to be made anymore. And so what do you do to preserve hardware which is going to eventually die? It's like, well, one way you can do it is you write it for an FPGA. You can recreate the transistor level operations in an FPGA. And that's exactly what they've done for so many systems. And they've got it all packaged into this little thing, the MiSTer. So this has got a third-party I/O board on the top, which has got like a VGA out.
Yeah.
VGA out and a sound jack. Then on the side you see a whole bunch of USB stuff. Is a USB shield on the bottom. It's not the fastest USB shield, but it is pretty good. When I say that, I think the important difference between like Raspberry Pi and the MiSTer is latency. The latency, like between button press and action, is probably as close to real hardware that you can possibly get wherever there is a USB interface involved.
Wow.
If that makes any sense. So the USB interface here goes straight to the FPGA. It does have some interpretation. There's like a Linux. There's actually a Linux distribution which runs on this as well at the same time. It's kind of in the background, but it's probably as fast as you can get.
Yeah.
Without it being emulated. And yeah, I mostly got it for the Amiga, and it's stunning. And where I started then to understand what my frustration with emulation for the Amiga was, and where it was the fact that the emulators will let you make a system which never existed.
Yeah.
And that's where things start to get a bit weird. And what I mean by that is I actually discovered this because of playing with the MiSTer. So the Minimig core basically will simulate the 68K, and it'll also do the 68K20, which was in the A1200. So basically, that gives you an A1200 or an A500 style system from this beast. But it's the system as with the chipset. And what I mean by that is if you try and tell an A500 that it has a hard drive, it won't know what the hell you're talking about, and it will crash. And it will go straight to the I can't really call it now, the little red line.
Oh, the meditation, the guru meditation.
Guru, yeah. It will literally boot up and be like, this system is trying to do something. I don't know what the hell you're doing.
Right. Okay.
And then that's when you start to read, and I'm reading around. I'm like, oh, I'd really like to have like an A500 like 68K system with a hard drive image, so I can put a whole bunch of stuff on there. And then it comes to that, yeah, the only system which was based on the 68K, which had a capability of having a hard drive, was the A600, the A600 HD. and it was a very specific version of the Kickstart, the BIOS, which supported it. And lo and behold, you set up an A500 style system for 68K. It only works with a hard drive with that BIOS. I know that was very boring and technical, but it was at that point where I'm like, oh my god, this is why when I'm emulating anything and I need a A500, everything goes off the wall crazy, because the emulators will let you do it, but you shouldn't really do it. And that's why you get all the CPU exceptions, you get loads of crashing, you get tons of like weird glitching, because the machine is being faked in a non-physical way.
Yeah, no, I
Whereas
understand
this,
that.
whereas this is creating the actual hardware, like, and the CPU timings are exact. You know, the kind of glitches you get on a real hardware, you get exactly the same glitches here. I think the most impressive thing is the USB though, because it's so seamless. So the way the MiSTer works is it's all everything's on a little flash card, and you start the system up, and it just boots straight into like a menu, and if you plug a new controller in it and press the button, it will instantly create like a profile for that controller. It remembers the controller. Okay. And so you then go off and you define your keys. You define the button presses for the the MiSTer itself.
Now, is this per system?
Well, you can do it global and per system.
Okay.
But it remembers. It remembers. So you don't have to have this problem where you're like, plug it in. Oh, I've got to redefine my
So it
keys.
just saves a profile on the SD card.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. It's just all seamless and all automatic. So, and again, it seems to know the difference between. Obviously, it seems to know the difference between like a keyboard, mouse, and a controller.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just so well done. And the fun part, which was I played around with recently, was there is a new core. There's a PlayStation core, the PSX core, and it's still sort of in alpha, beta kind of development level. But even though it's in alpha or beta, I was expecting so many things to be broken, it not work correctly. This guy, complete genius. Like he basically, he basically created what was about 80% of what a PlayStation is, and it still works. It actually will play games. One I was going to say, one of the impressive ones, I'm not sure, I think you saw it, was the Quake a video I recorded.
Yeah.
So what the interesting thing there is that's playing controller mouse. And yeah, that was actually one of those things I thought was super impressive, because it's like...
So you're playing the PlayStation version of Quake, but it's picking up the keyboard and mouse?
Well, no. So at the time, it was I was using a controller and a mouse. So the PlayStation you could get a mouse for.
Yes,
but then
I do vaguely remember that. Yeah, the PlayStation.
Yeah, mouse, and so it was kind of cool. It was like, I can just define my controller as a mouse. And I was thinking to myself, well, how do I tell it's that mouse rather than some mouse I've plugged in? It knows. It just automatically knows. It's like, this is a mouse. You're going to use this. What are you talking about?
That's helpful.
And then and then I was just using the controller. Now, what is interesting is the same thing as you just said. What is interesting is that you can define per core hotkeys. So you can make a keyboard. You can fake a controller using the keyboard. And so you could technically do keyboard and mouse as well. It's just stunning. It's a wonderful device. I have mostly spent time doing the PlayStation, obviously, the Amiga, spectrums of all types, I guess, and the C64 mostly. A few game consoles here and there, but mostly both systems.
So this here is the MiSTer. I'm not going to completely take it apart, but basically the FPGA board in the middle of it is where the brains are, and it's based on a D10 Nano board by Teresic. I probably just butchered that name. On this board alone, it has HDMI output. That's one thing I didn't speak about very much, but the HDMI output is quite nice. The MiSTer will auto upscale to whatever display resolution you want, and it's crisp. It's absolutely beautiful, and it just gets powered by a 5 volts jack there. On this side, this thing you can see says this face outwards is a memory expansion plugged into one of the GPIOs. This is used for quite a few of the cores, and largely, as I say, to do with memory speed. And the little module here that you can see, which is an extra, you can sort of see it on this side, you can sort of see it on this side as well. That's a real-time clock, so that's used by some of the cores to obviously set the time. So if the Amiga, for example, uses this, and yeah, if it's available, it just works. Which is actually one of the features which I really like about the MiSTer in general. Things just work. There are a few teething problems you can face, but you know, for most purposes, it just works. This rather sketchy looking thing here is just a USB bridge, which goes to the USB ports here. There is power on one side. Oh dear. There is power on one side, and basically the rest of them are usable USB ports. What else is on here? Yeah, so the hat that you can see on the top here is the analog I/O, and again it interfaces via some GPIO there. And here basically there is a fan, although it's kind of optional. The MiSTer itself, or I should say the FPGA board itself, is rated to be used without any cooling. So yeah, it'll get hot, but it's apparently fine. I've never had any problems with it, but I've got the fan on it anyway. So the analog I/O basically gives you a couple of these buttons here. So it's like a reset, soft reset, hard reset, menus, and some user button, which are used for various things. If you don't have a keyboard, for example, connected to it. The VGA output, the VGA output is, as you might see, lots of people can use these to drive old CRT displays if they're recreating arcade cabinets, which is quite cool. The other thing which is quite good on this is arcade cores. People are actually working on arcade machines, essentially the hardware for arcade machines recreated in the FPGA. So that's also super nice. Now this little USB is not actually USB. This is actually like an extra user peripheral. So for example, you can get a small dongle to basically convert an NES controller, for example, or some other controller straight to this essentially interface. And yes, it can use the original hardware. That's about it, really. Yeah, everything goes onto your SD card, which sits just there. There is another SD card slot on the top, and this is for certain cores which can directly interface with an SD card. Yeah, it's a beautiful little bit of kit.
Yeah, because you recommended it looking in the Next, and actually that's largely how I went down this FPGA train, because I was looking at getting a Next because I wanted to really revive my old Spectrum, see if my parents could find it in the loft and send it me, and then you I kept seeing you post things up about the Next, and I was like, the Next sounds so cool.
It really is.
and then I was looking into it, and it's like, it's an FPGA. Okay, cool. And I was then thinking, given it's an FPGA, it could probably run other stuff, and it can, as an unofficial capacity, it can run other systems as well. And then that's where it was like, then for some reason it was like FPGA project, MiSTer. So yeah, I mean, I've played around a little bit with the Next core, but not very much. Mostly just like a hello world. Oh, okay, it boots. Things work. I can play a couple of games.
I haven't looked at the the MiSTer version of the Next. I don't know if is it the exact core, or is it just somebody else is working on it, or
I think it's basically a ported core. So the way I understand a lot of this is that there is a few things which make programming for the MiSTer specific to this type of FPGA, but it's not much. It's like a few little bits here and there, and so there's like minimal changes which need to be made. So basically, again, I have not done any FPGA programming, so I'm I'm not an authority on any of this.
Yeah.
But there's like 2 or 3 programming languages which are fairly standard, Verilog and VHDL, which so if you can get something working on a MiSTer FPGA, you can technically get it working on most FPGAs with some work. And most of the stuff which is going along with this is an example. So the FPGA board talks to this I/O hat
so can you buy that on its own, that middle part?
Yeah.
But
yeah, I bought it on,
what can you run with just that middle part?
With just the middle part, any core which doesn't require you to have external memory, and that runs. I think there's about 5 or 6, maybe 7 cores which you can run without this external RAM slot.
Right. Okay.
So, and the reason why that's there is because some systems, for timing, some systems don't like to use the onboard RAM. So there's I think there's 2 gigabytes of RAM, and it's too fast. It's like apparently way too fast, and it's a pain in the ass for some of these old systems to interface with.
Yeah.
And so they opted for this RAM slot, which is basically just an SD. It's just like an SD RAM chip on it, and that enables all cores. But the one which I played, I think, while I was waiting for the rest of this kit to turn up was the Sega Genesis, so Master System. That runs without it.
So all that's on there as well.
Yeah, it runs without it. You can also run 486. There's a AO 486 core, which I think is amazing because you can run.
Get Doom on there.
You can run if you want a slow ass 486 with a USB interface, which is completely bizarre because it didn't exist back then. You can totally do it.
No, because it was an Apple thing, wasn't it? USB.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not sure. It might have been the first sort of invention of or adopting.
I'm not entirely sure, but for some reason, something tells me that was a technology that they brought out originally and then just left it.
It might have been, and it's funny, right? Because I'm an Apple user, but again, it's because of workflow. In science, we use Linux a lot, and basically the Apple Mac OS is BSD, and it's Linux. So you get kind of best of both worlds. You get this system which works and doesn't crash too often, and it looks nice, and multimedia works. And so a lot of scientists, a lot of physicists use Mac OS as their sort of staple. But what's interesting, as being a Mac user for the last sort of decade-ish, maybe a bit longer, is the amount of things that initially came out on the Mac for their laptops, which people would be like, "Oh, it's just so dumb." Might have to buy an separate dongle to do X, Y, and Z. This is completely cack. And then you remind them that USB-C Thunderbolt is that was an early uptake by Apple, actually.
It was just called Thunderbolt, wasn't it?
It was called Thunderbolt. It's exactly the same. And so I had this old Mac with 2 Thunderbolt ports on it, and I could basically plug a dock into it and have like 4 or 5 monitors and all my USB stuff plugged into it at the same time. And now everybody's like, oh yeah, I used to have a docking station which I actually plugged my laptop physically into to do the same thing. I'm like, yeah, amateurs. We were doing this 5 years ago.
Yeah, peasants.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Apples are expensive, and
that's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah, no, apples are expensive, and again, I think it's just, it's like you say about the rivalry, right? I mean, like in the PC gaming world, it was always like Nvidia versus AMD. Oh, my graphics card better than yours, and it didn't really matter at all because they're all price point performance. There was only a few things which would specifically run poor on each card.
Yeah,
did not matter at all.
No,
and it's the same. It's interesting how that kind of I don't know, tribalism, I guess, kind of gets kind of pushed out. So I guess it's the same now with PlayStation and Xbox and things like that these days.
It's best to just own all the machines.
And exactly. Yeah,
you win all the arguments. Then it's like, I don't care what it's running on.
And like, the thing is, same thing. It's I'm gonna do this thing, a whole thing of like speaking as a scientist. But it's the truth. It's like, speaking as a scientist, I've been trained to kind of take a step back and see things for the pros and cons. And in truth, there's almost no difference. And like, it's the same thing for a Mac. Yeah, they're expensive, but there is a reason why they're expensive, and it's not just because of marketing. Some of it is, absolutely some of it is, but other things aren't. And if you actually read behind the lines, you can actually see why some of their laptops were expensive. I mean, like the one I was talking about with the Thunderbolt, still have it, actually, still works. It's like 10 years old, still works. That machine, Apple basically contracted at Intel to give them a very specific slice of their performance curve. And essentially what you got in that laptop was what would be essentially like a black edition, if you were to buy one for a PC. It was basically a CPU which ran faster, cooler. So it wasn't just some like, oh, we're going to put some gimped CPU in a laptop because that's what we're doing. We're going to sell you something cheap. It wasn't. If you actually got a laptop from Acer of exactly the same spec and ran Linux, let's say, on both machines, the Mac would run faster and cooler. And again, it's like, most people, they don't care. Most people don't care about that. I mean, crikey, I never had mine thermal throttle.
People look at numbers. They look at numbers.
Yeah, why would I care either? But again, it's the same thing. It's like, it's the same thing for like the Mac Pro. Like the Mac Pro, everybody always says, oh, the Mac Pro is ridiculously expensive for what it is. True, but it's also a server. It's enterprise gear. You're buying enterprise gear, and if you buy hardware like for like from an actual manufacturer like Dell, you're only saving about, you're saving about $1,000, maybe less, about $500. It's a saving, but it's not like what people talk about, where they're like, oh, I can buy an i7 and it's faster than a Mac Pro. It's like, yeah, you can. Yeah. Good luck at running a Mac i7 with 2 CPUs though, because you can't. It's like, you actually can't. So yeah, if you want a 24, back then it was like, if you want a 24 core machine, you're looking at a server with a Xeon processor or something like this.
Yeah.
Most users don't need that. Most people don't need that at all.
They don't need that power.
No, you don't. And if you're playing games, you know, back then, I think an i5 was like the preferred machine because most games were not highly threaded, and you could get a higher CPU speed. Right?
It's always frustrating. I mean, especially in the PC world with numbers and figures, because they at the end of the day, they're brilliant sales. They're brilliant salesmen, brilliant car salesmen, and they know
got one of these myself.
That they know as human beings that if it's a bigger number, it's got to be better.
It's better,
and they trick us all the time. I mean, I've recently built a machine specifically for VR. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Now, that machine consists of it's got an i7 processor in it, but it's generation 3, right?
Oh, okay.
So it's generation 3.
Yeah.
There's 16 gig of RAM in it, but it's DDR3.
DDR. I was going to say it was DDR3. Right?
DDR3.
Yeah.
It's got a GTX 970 in it as the graphics card.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So.
Sorry. Dropping stuff on the floor.
oh no! Oh, you missed that. So, you're looking at a 10-year-old computer at least.
Yeah.
But it can run VR, and I've ran Half-Life Alyx on it perfectly.
Oh, I need to play that. I need to play that. That's
the way they advertise you've got to buy the best, the top tier. You've got to spend. I mean, graphics card prices now are just horrendous.
It's insane.
Absolutely horrendous.
Absolutely insane.
But people fall for it.
I mean,
they fall for it. It's like it's like what you could just spend on a computer. Oh, I'm going to spend $4,000 on a computer. Oh, okay, what are you going to play on it? Oh, probably some game, like Solitaire maybe, or it's like, what?
Skyrim.
Yeah, so some old game. Yeah, I mean the first game that I always used to load on to any new build was Quake straight away.
Yeah.
Straight away. It didn't matter. Quake on. Is it running Quake? Yeah, that's it.
So I mean it's, and again I think I agree like 100%. You know and I think that's where you know there's this sort of I guess it's the kind of the boys and their toys kind of culture where as you say you want the best of the best of the best. It's got to be fantastic, but then if you were to make a joke, the computer sits there most of the time bored, not doing anything. And you're right. I think that's the thing. I think you can have a hell of a lot of fun with a computer depending on what you want to do. And again, it's like, I mean, I mostly play Elite Dangerous on my PC. I play a couple of other things, but it's mostly Elite Dangerous. And Odyssey was a bit of a power hug, power glutton for power.
Yeah.
It's much better now. But yeah, like it used to be that like every X many years I would think about buying a new computer because my old one was starting to get a bit long in the tooth.
We've all
long
done
in the tooth for what I was using it for.
Mm-hmm.
These days it's like, well, I'm still having fun playing Elite Dangerous. As long as my computer works. Why the hell do I want to upgrade it?
Yeah, I think hardware, and it's the same with phones as well. Hardware has moved so quickly that people writing the games now haven't caught up now. That they haven't.
So actually, that's another very good point. And again, like I'm not a developer. I know that lots of people who have had a quick go with Python consider themselves developers. So in that respect, I'm a uber elite programmer. C++, hell yeah. But yeah, I think you're exactly right. It's like a friend of mine was getting all excited about the PlayStation 3, I think it was, when it was coming out. And they're going through tech specs. Oh, it's got this much RAM, and it's got this. And I was like saying, well, if you program correctly, you don't need that much RAM. Because what they're doing is they're literally just being like, oh, hey, rather than doing anything efficiently, we're just going to dump everything in RAM and call from memory.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, I understand that sometimes you've got a lot of assets, and that's the only way you can do it. But for some things, it's not required. Like, I remember playing a couple of games and thinking like, graphics aren't even that good. Like, and the level of detail for the models isn't actually that good.
Yeah.
But it's like, why is this taking like 2 or 3 gigabytes of RAM, whereas like this other game, which arguably looks better, is only using half, right? And again, it just speaks to the fact that the game engines are very inefficient, and they're built to, as you say, the wow factor. I mean, Michael Bay sort of explosions every 5 seconds, rather than actually being done correctly.
Well, a lot of games now are just built upon a made engine, aren't they? So
Yes,
take the Unreal Engine for instance.
Yeah. I think that's where my beef at the gaming community comes when I talk about Elite Dangerous as well, because FDev, yes, they've got their faults. I'm not a white knight. I can see that they've made mistakes, and I can see that sometimes the way that people have found their mistakes will points to the fact that they've had like 5 or 6 different people working on the same thing who've all moved on, and so it's like, here's my old work, please make it work, and then and it just gets problem on top of problem. But at the same time, it's like they've written their own engine, and some of what they've done is astounding from a technical standpoint.
There's a lot going on, isn't there? A hell of a lot.
Yeah, especially the planetary generation. As much as people complain about that it's too bland these days, and that they want caves and stuff. Truth is,
caves.
Oh, I'd love caves. Yeah, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I'd love a bit more interesting features on planetary surfaces. But again, it's the same thing though. It's like they've managed to write a proprietary engine which will generate terrain on the fly on the GPU. Like, there was a time when that was basically considered witchcraft, right? It's like, this is GPU programming, which is complicated at best. I mean, I used to follow the development of a 3D rendering application, and when they stepped into the realm of GPU, you would get different results on different graphics cards of the same manufacturer. So the fact that the FDev were able to do this and be like, we can make a planet look identical regardless of which machine you have, which graphics card you've got, PlayStation, whatever, it's gonna look the same. Like, I'm impressed by that. Maybe I'm a simple person, but I think stuff like that it's when you actually stop and look at the technical details. Yeah, it's far more impressive than simply just farming out an Unreal Engine or a Crytek engine or something like that. I mean, yeah, a lot of game developers will modify those engines, but still, yeah.
But the thing is, they end up being almost the same game.
Yeah, they do.
They always end up being the same game.
Yeah.
It might have different skin.
Yeah.
But the heart of it is hang on, this, I'm picking up stuff. There's my inventory. Okay, I've got to collect this. I've got to walk through there.
Well,
hang on, it's the same game.
it's like the fact, for example, that Bethesda used the same essentially the same engine for all of their Elder Scrolls games, right up to, well, they're still doing it, I think. There was almost, you could see the bugs which were present in Morrowind were still present in Skyrim. This kind of thing. You're like, guys, did you not rewrite any of this?
It's all quickness, isn't it? It's got to be.
But that's I think in terms of Bethesda, that's their own engine, so it's the same complaint almost. But you're right. I mean, it's exactly the same sort of thing. There's so many companies which they base their tech on like Unreal, or they've basically got the same engine, which is just the same game reskinned.
I think Hello Games are literally taking the piss out of everybody. I really do, for what they've achieved with No Man's Sky.
Yeah, I mean,
and giving it away for free. It's like, oh, we've just added all these extra features. We're not going to charge you. There you go and play.
So No Man's Sky is one I've not played. So full disclosure,
I've gone back to it about 4 or 5 times now, and I can't put the time into this game. It will take away my life. I mean, Elite Dangerous took away my life for a while, but No Man's Sky, there is so much to do in it. I can't invest that time yet. But it's incredible.
So it's a game which I've meant to pick up, and what put me off it initially was not actually all of the. It wasn't actually all of the thing about like, oh, it being falsely advertised or allegedly. Sorry,
it was
allegedly.
bad when it came out. It was bad. It was bad.
What it was actually was the flight model. I remember all these videos which looked so cool, and then I think I watched Oh, I watched Psycho Cow play it,
Mm.
and I was like, he's complaining about not being able to fly in a kind of even a flight sim style of way. It seems like like it's all on a rail. At least back then, and that was like, ah,
But
oh
but
no.
it never pretends to be a simulation, though.
Yeah,
There is
that's
that.
the thing. Like, I think since then, since they've really tried hard to, as I say, win back the community, it's definitely a game which I think I should pick up and play. Because again,
I'd be
it's like the whole
careful.
thing of
I'd be careful.
I don't have enough time to play games as it is. I've got a young family, and I barely
Yeah.
I barely play. I keep meaning to go back out and explore.
All I'll say if you do start playing it is everything wants to kill you. Everything, even your own.
Look at this! Oh, I'm dead.
Even your own suit is like, I'm gonna kill you. If you don't do this and get oxygen quick or repair this, you're gonna die.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Trying to think of.
You start the game in panic.
It reminds me of one game I played because I think a group of the truckers were playing it during like the alpha stage, and it's Stationeers, I think it is, and that game, it was like, that game I can only describe as built for people who are hardcore at, at everything. So it's like, you know, oh, I want to put like a spanner in my right hand. Hang on a minute, I've got to select it in my inventory and then press the button for my right hand. Right, great, I've got the spanner in my right hand. Right.
Okay.
And it's like you say, it's like you're slowly dying, running out of oxygen.
Yeah.
You've got to make yourself a shelter, and it's like, okay, I've got to turn this, open the oxygen tank to fill this volume of space. Oh wait, there's a leak. I'm dead. I'm dead. It's like every single step of the way is like pulling teeth.
Oh,
I think
it
it's
does.
I think
It
it's
does.
better now.
That does sound a little bit like No Man's Sky, but that's only for I'd only say that for the first couple of hours. I mean, once you've sorted out the first parts of the game,
Yeah.
which is brilliant. It really is. But,
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's the same thing. When it comes to like this tribalism of like, oh, No Man's Sky versus Star Citizen versus Elite. I mean, truth is, for me, is Elite holds a massive amount of nostalgia. I mean,
there is that. There is that, and it's
yeah,
a simulation.
for me,
And it's a
yeah,
simulation.
and it's a simulation, and
Yeah.
and again, that's where it speaks to me.
Absolutely. Yeah. I agree.
Because I mean, to be honest, I know that with Star Citizen, it's really the spiritual successor to Wing Commander, and I was never a big fan of Wing Commander. I think I played it on a Amiga CD, actually, 32.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That would make sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was at that friend's house who had everything. Well, which in my opinion, the CD32 was another system which was way ahead of its time.
Well, Amiga in general. Yeah.
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 But yeah, so I never really had to have that attachment to it. Whereas with Elite, I basically borrowed Frontier Elite 2 from a friend because they were like, "Oh, I got this game. I can't really make head nor tails of it. Do you want it?" And he gave it to me, and I played it, and I was like, "What's going on here?" But then eventually, I think there's like almost like a tutorial walkthrough in the manual. At the first few pages, it tells you
The
like,
days of manuals.
yeah,
This
the
big.
days of manuals, how to play this game. This is complicated. It's got more than 5 buttons. Yeah, so I played Frontier Elite 2. I played that to death. I played it on the Amiga. I mean, you'll laugh, right? It's one of these things where I read in the game magazine about like this whole thing about getting the secret ship in the game, the Mirage, which didn't exist. It was a marketing ploy by Braben to keep people playing the game.
Okay.
But still, I loved playing the game, and so I just kept playing it.
It's like Raxler then.
Yeah, yeah. Except I've not looked into that. But it's the same. It's a similar sort of thing. So I played Elite 2, and then Elite 3 obviously was this kind of bit of a mess. But I played a little bit of that on the PC. Again, in retrospect, it was like every so often. That's the draw. That's what I'm saying about the nostalgia for me. every so often I would go back to Elite. It'd be like oh, I'd start playing Elite 2, and then it'd be like, okay, well, no, there's Elite 3. I think I'll play that because it's it's a little bit graphically better and things like this. And then I'd play that for a little bit, and then I'd be like, oh, I wonder if anybody's got an open source project to remake this game, and that would happen every like 6 months. Every 6 months, every year almost, I was like,
Wow.
oh yeah, I want to play this game. And as a simulation, yeah, Elite 2 was like Newtonian physics engine, and it's like the fact that you can set your velocity to a certain velocity and do like a slingshot sort of maneuver from a planet is like, it's just amazing. I mean, for
Next
most
level.
people, for most people, you just want to go pew 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 and kill stuff. But me, I was really getting into physics back then, and so yeah, the fact that this even existed as a video game, I was like so amazed, so impressed by it.
Yeah.
And then moving forward, if you would have shown my 12-year-old self Elite Dangerous back then, I think I would have pooped, because because I was always like, when I first saw Elite Dangerous, I'm like, oh my god, I need to back this, and it was already done. The Kickstarter was already finished. I was like, oh.
Yeah, I was exactly the same. As soon as I don't think there was any pause. As soon as I found out that it was coming out, it was like, I need it. There's no
yeah.
there's no umming and ahhing. I need this game. Yeah.
So I waited until the second phase of beta, because again, it was one of those things where I watched it. I didn't want to. It's not that I didn't want to play it. I did. I really was itching to play every second of the day. But it was one of those things where what I wanted to play it is when it actually started to become more like elite, rather than just being like, okay, we've got one system and we're gonna do bits and bobs. It was like, yeah, we want to be able to do a bit of space flight, and yeah. So I got into it at beta 2.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I don't know, like my background is, I mean for everybody who cares, my background, I'm a physicist, and
well, we'll get into that in a little bit.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But basically, like, there's so much in Elite, which is, as far as is feasibly simulatable, is correct. Obviously, space flight, you've got to suspend some belief, in some respects, but for most of the intended purposes, a lot of it is correct. Yeah. So when I'm playing a game and I'm just like, oh man, this is so cool. It's like I think it's during the last exploration trip back. So this is obviously recent, and I mean you got on that planet as well, orbiting a white dwarf. It's really dumb. Like, the things I'm so impressed about, like, everybody's like, with Odyssey, they're like, oh, this looks pretty, this is atmosphere, this is everything. Oh, I can shoot stuff. For me, it was like, oh, I'm getting closer to this star. Oh, look, the temperature's going up.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, the surface temperature's going up. Oh, I'm actually being killed by the environment now. I wasn't 10 seconds ago. What the hell?
Yeah. It's the attention to detail with things like that, isn't it?
And stuff like back when Odyssey was in beta, or well, alpha, or whatever you want to call it, it was the same thing. It's like landing on a planet which is fairly hot and stepping into the shadows, and it being cool enough that your suit turns its cooling systems off. Oh, I can survive a little bit longer if I stay in the shadows. Like, and again, most people probably don't care nor notice, but those details are there. So cool. Yeah. Just nerd.
It is such a fantastic game.
Yeah.
I've spent far too long on it, far too much money on it. But it's But I mean,
damn you, Braven.
I mean, 20. Oh, when was it released? Was it December 2015 or 2016?
2014, December 2014. Yeah.
So December
2015 was like its first year, essentially.
Yeah. So that's when I started playing it, and I'm still playing, and not as often as it was, because it was every night, constantly, every night.
Yeah.
But
same.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, it's the same thing. It's like, I put it down for periods.
Which you're allowed to play another game.
I mean, again,
Anyway.
it's the same thing. I think a lot of people have this attachment to certain things, and it's like I certainly suffer from that. So sometimes I'm playing Elite, and I'm playing Elite. It's not that I'm not enjoying it, because I do, but then there's some other video games, and I'm sort of thinking to myself, wow, I've got this like little project that I'm working on, a little thing I'm working on in Elite, and so I don't end up playing other games.
Yeah, it's ruined. It utterly ruined a lot of games for me. Elite did.
Yeah.
It really did. And I've had to go back to them because I mean, Witcher 3. When did that come out? I think that came out in 2016.
Yeah,
I'm going to say 2016. And my brother for years was going, "You've got to play this game." I was like, "Oh, I'll get right. I'm playing Elite, I can't." And it wasn't until a few years back that I was like, right, you know what? I'm having a break now.
I'm having a break. I'm on an Elite holiday.
Yeah, I'm gonna put Witcher 3 on, and I was hooked. Absolutely.
Oh my gosh!
What a masterpiece of a game that was.
I mean, you're so right. I mean, I think that's one of those things of the quality of the quality of a curse, I suppose, of getting into a game so deeply. I mean, and not many people. Again, I think the funny thing with Elite is, again, maybe it's a generational thing, or it's just a certain mindset. So you and I are of the generation where whenever we played games, mostly it was about the gameplay, and you had to often have a lot of patience in order to understand what was going on in the game.
Well, you had to have patience to load the game up for a start.
Yeah, patience to load the game first. Yeah, that was your first test.
Yeah.
And I know it's not as if every game back then was good. A lot of games back in the 80s and 90s were complete garbage. But at the same time, when there was a game which was like, just gets it right, it just got it so right. Yes. And you could just sink hours and hours and hours into the game. Like one of the games which I really got into on the Amiga back in the day, which again I did when I got the MiSTer. I was like, this is happening. Was Sensible Water Soccer. So I am not big into football. I'm not big into soccer or whatever you want to call it. But when I was growing up, part of what I had a good bonding with my brother was sports. So I played football. We all had kickabout and stuff like this. But then playing video games, playing computer games, he wasn't a massive fan of playing computer games, but he did like football. And so for him, he would be playing like Championship Manager, Premier Manager 2, and things like this, Premier Manager 3 on the Amiga. And I was not a big fan of those. I did get into them at some point, but I was not like a huge super fan. Sensible Water Soccer, however, oh my God. This was like the rivalry between me and my brother. Like we would play that game so much.
Could you change the name of the characters of the players?
So yeah, if you played like a custom tournament, you could make your own team names and everything.
Yeah. See that's that instantly. That's the draw, isn't it?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. But for us, it was mostly like, oh yeah, can I take our local team? Okay, Sheffield United. Can we make them the best team ever? And you'd play like 3 or 4 seasons and break your joystick a few times, but yeah, I sank so many hours into that game just because there's something which is just so like fluid about that game. It's fast moving. It's got enough like you can predict what's going to happen even if it's fast moving. It's like when you play it's like, how would I describe it? It's like the difference between a game where you're trying to control it versus a game which you're just playing. And I think it's like thinking in games like in top-down like adventure games. I'm trying to think of the terms of like a game. So
it's almost as though your muscle memory kicks in.
Yeah. It just becomes like instinct, right? And
I would say a lot of shoot 'em ups. You become like that when you're playing.
And there's a difference between like a good one and a bad one.
Yes.
Like the good one, like the hit detection is just perfect. The timing and like you said, maybe it's a latency thing, but like it doesn't feel like you're fighting against you're fighting against the controls. You're fighting against the.
There's a big difference as well that I found, where some games I cannot play with a pad. It has to be with a joystick. There's just more tactile feel. If I try and play shoot 'em up on a pad, on a bullet, especially like a Japanese bullet hell type. I'm absolutely rubbish. You give me a joystick, and I'm literally just watching. I'm not even looking at my ship. I'm literally looking at the patterns of the bullets, and almost just twitch. I don't even know what my hand's doing. Yeah.
No, it's amazing. Like, if anybody's bored enough to watch, I did like 3 or 4 videos where I'm playing Sensible Order Soccer, and I start out playing it on a like a PlayStation style. It's a Logitech, what is it, G400 and whatever, PlayStation style controller, and you can see the level of frustration on on my face.
It's like I wasn't this bad at this game. What's going on?
I am making mistakes. There's like, I'm trying to clear the ball and it's going all over the place. I'm just like, what is going on here? And then I bought like a cheapo. I bought like a cheapo kit to make a an arcade controller.
Oh, is that your sandwich box one?
Yeah, so I originally had a sandwich box, right? So for everybody else, I had this like sandwich box. I made like one button, because an Amiga, you only need one button. You only need one button to rule the world of an Amiga. You don't need 50. What are you talking about? I made just
and close to the space bar.
Night and day. Oh my gosh, it's like I went from being able to barely do anything in this game to actually beating and feeling like I was playing the game like I used to.
Well, the thing is, we started off with joysticks. You went to an arcade, it was a joystick. So a lot of, look at that, nice. So again, like what you've said, is it a generational thing? Is it because that muscle memory is already there?
And it's also like left-handedness versus right-handedness in the games as well. So like it didn't really matter back then so much. Like your joystick would always be like a stick with 2 buttons on either side, so you can just flip it. So my memory of playing games on the Amiga, I think, is the opposite of how the standard layout is. So that's the other thing I was saying about the MiSTer, remembering your controller. So when I have the Amiga core, it knows that the joystick is upside down. So I have to basically like control the menu if I'm doing it with the joystick right way up. It goes to the Amiga core, and then flip my joystick round.
You know what? I've just that's something I've never thought about until now. When you hold when I hold the joystick, obviously I'm holding it with my left hand, and then I'm firing with my left thumb, but I'm holding the joystick with my right hand. Okay. But arcade, or that stick, you're controlling it with your left hand and using the buttons on your right hand. So yes, completely opposite. I've never thought about that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing which that's why I made that the lunchbox thing, because I was like, oh, I'm just going to make it in the way that I remember. So right-handed.
So looking at your lunchbox, your lunchbox.
The lunchbox.
Your controller you've made. So is the joystick on the left-hand side or the right-hand side?
So joysticks on the so it's a standard layout. So joysticks on the left-hand side.
Right. So that's that's arcade layout,
that's arcade style,
and
right.
that's exactly how I've laid it out on my my Pi arcade.
Yeah, but then for the Amiga, I'd flip it this way. So I'd be playing it like this.
Yes.
So I'd have like 1 button, 2 buttons active.
And that would make sense. That would make sense. Yeah. That would make sense.
Great, absolutely love it. Yeah.
That's weird. I've only just thought about that.
Yeah.
Almost swapping over. Whereas with a pad, it's literally, but in both hands, and it's.
Yeah.
I mean, originally. Originally,
Sorry.
the obviously the analog sticks. I think, especially on the original PSX, they were parallel to each other, weren't they? It wasn't until was it Xbox who changed the configuration. So you had the left hand side was higher than, and a lot of people have got used to that now, haven't they? I mean, the Sony pads, they're still parallel, aren't they? But so you work at a place called Snolab, I believe.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit like that? Sounds very interesting. Sounds very Half-Life and Gordon Freeman.
I describe it. I actually for everybody, and it's a joke which I've said so many times, and most people are just like, "What?" But I'll say it again. The reason why everything went wrong that day at the Black Mesa facility is because Gordon Freeman is a theoretical physicist.
Yeah.
If he was an experimental physicist, things would not have gone wrong.
He should have had the sack on the spot, mate.
He should not have actually been anywhere near that lab. I have never seen a theoretical physicist anywhere near any equipment.
Yeah.
But anyway, jokes aside.
I think they must have just shown him some cake and said, just pop in there, have some cake.
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, a little bit of background really is that it links back to video games again. It's like when I was in school, getting towards the time where I'm thinking about whether I want to go to university or not, or if that's an option for me. I knew my favorite subjects at the time were maths, physics, and chemistry.
Yeah. And
at the time when it was getting closer, I knew that I was not so hot with chemistry, but physics and maths were great. And if I had to choose the two, I'd go physics. And so, yeah, I did physics with astronomy. And again, that's where the elite comes in, because I'm just like, I could go and fly around the stars. So I was really more into the astronomy side of things. Anyway, long story short is I did a project in my final year physics, which was like hands-on hardware, building some equipment. And we made a cosmic ray telescope using some like salvaged detector equipment, and I thought that was awesome. And the person who supervised me was like, "Oh, hey, do you ever consider doing a PhD?" And I was like, "Oh, no, I don't think I'm actually good enough." And again, it was one of those things where everybody I knew, who like your peers, and you look up to your peers.
Yeah.
And again, this goes back to me being very working class, is that most people had their lives kind of like together. My life wasn't not as if it was a mess. No, it was just that I had to work so hard just to keep up with everybody else. That's how I felt.
Okay.
And so when it came to this whole thing of possibly doing a PhD, everybody else had already got their positions. Everybody else had already got their placements, basically. And I didn't even consider it, because all of the people who were doing PhD I thought were so much smarter than I was. And then it was my person who then became my supervisor sort of took a chance, because he was like, hey, this kid just did this hardware project and he barely required any supervision. And that was pretty impressive. And so, yeah, it kind of took a chance on me, and I got a position in experimental particle physics, which sounds like,
awesome. Sounds awesome.
which so roll on a few years. When I got my PhD, I moved to Canada, largely because my fiance at the time, now wife, I sort of wanted to follow her, and there was a position available at the same university. Now, we didn't tell anybody that we were that we were engaged or whatever. I just applied for it, and I got it. And at that point, it was like, surprise. But basically, yeah, I worked on a dark matter experiment called Deep 3600, which is actually still there. It's still at Snolab. Basically, yeah, this is a deep underground clean lab. It's called Snolab because it's based out of a previous experiment, which was the Sudbury Neutrino Observatory. I don't going to get too technical, but basically this was an experiment which ultimately solved like a really big problem in physics. I know that sounds like, oh, who cares about big problems in physics? But the thing is about physics is that it's not that we want to know everything. I mean, well, that's not true. We do. We totally want to know everything.
Yeah.
But what it is that you want to be able to have a model, and that model has to be able to predict certain things, and it has to also fit with observables. So you can't just make a model to be like, oh, hey, I've got this model, it fixes this problem over here. Ignore all this junk over there. It's like, no. You have to make models which fit everything, or
Gotcha.
fit all the observables which you can reasonably predict, and make predictions. And so there was basically this whole prediction of like how the sun works. When physicists started to be able, the technology became available to be able to test some of these models, they of course did, and the observables were completely different to what the theory prediction was. And of course, everybody's like, "Oh my god, why?"
So is this like fusion reactor type stuff?
This is, yeah. So the original problem was called the solar neutrino problem, and so what it is that nuclear physicists at the time, this is like 60s, 70s, if I get my timescales correctly, done correctly. We'd proven that the neutrinos exist, and I mean this gets very technical, but basically during reactions you get particles coming out. So smash two hydrogen together creates it creates a larger particle, and it also releases energy. But then as this process goes on, until you get hydrogen, it produces different particles. It produces like electrons, gammas, neutrinos. For people who need to look those up, that's fine. It's very niche. But the neutrinos are the only thing which are produced in the core directly, which don't really interact with much material. So you can get neutrinos which get produced in the core of the sun, and they will pass out of the sun and come, just travel until they stop. Now they're so weakly interacting that that's possible, right? And so what you do is you make an experiment, and you literally just run the statistics. You make an experiment large enough that you might be able to get 1 or 2 interactions from particles from the sun a day, and you just run that experiment and watch it. So yeah, what the Sudbury Neutrino Observatory did was to build an experiment which had a very special detector medium, which was heavy water. And the long story short is, this just allowed them to probe a specific interaction type with neutrinos, which the other experiments hadn't been able to do. And so it gives you like 2 points of reference. You've got the normal interactions which happen with all this other stuff, and then you've got this special interaction which only happens with heavy water, and it then allows you to compare. And that solved everything, because they were able to prove that I just explained everything without even telling what the problem was. The problem was, I have to edit this and go back. The problem was that when they observed neutrinos coming from the sun, they saw less. They saw like about half of what you should get according to theory. And the one of the models which was around was that these neutrinos can spontaneously change flavor. And again, this is getting a little bit very much too detailed, but basically when they change flavor, there's 3 flavors, and you can't actually do much detection with 2 of the flavors. If that's the simplest way I can put it.
Okay.
And so what it is that most of the other detectors were seeing this one type of interaction which occurs for all types, but predominantly this one type. Whereas the SNO experiment, or the Sudbury Neutrino experiment, observatory, sorry, they got all of those 3 types plus 1 which is specific to one of the flavors. And so that allows you to be like, oh well, if my total signal is this, but this one specific type is this, it's just like you can use it as a cross calibration, and then if that tells you, yeah, what the total actually is. And they solved the neutrino problem and got the Nobel Prize for it and everything. Yeah, and so moving forward, they extended this lab underground. So it's basically a lab space which is about 2 miles underground in a active nickel mine in Sudbury. Yeah.
So you spend most of your working hours underground?
Well, I spend most of my working hours right now working from home, but I do shifts underground. Yeah. And so yeah, you have to go there early in the morning, at like 5 o'clock in the morning, and put all your mining gear on, and go down in the cage, which is like express elevator down.
Wow. So how deep is this? Is this hole?
The deepest you can reach with the cage, I think, is around 76,000 feet.
Wow.
Sorry, 7,600. Sorry, 7,600 feet. We get off at 6,800. Yeah, we got off at 6,800 and walk, and the mining activities, I think, are down at 9,000, 10,000 these days. But they don't. They basically go down, get off at 68, and then they have to drive down.
So what's the reason for it? What's the reason for being underground? Is it because is it because the experiments are
dodgy?
Yeah.
No. Well, if you see some of the electronics that I have seen, yes, dodgy as. No, no, it's backgrounds. Basically, the deeper you go underground, the more you are shielded from cosmic rays, actually. So what it is that the universe at large is very good at making very high energy particles. So you get like supernova remnants, high mass compact objects like white dwarfs and neutron stars, etc. And they actually act as like natural accelerators. And so you end up with these protons, so like hydrogen, single particles mostly, which are coming at us with energies like far in excess of anything we can produce on the Earth. And they just hit the upper atmosphere, and then they just send a spray of particles through the atmosphere.
So this is happening while we're on the surface.
Obviously. Oh, this is happening all the time. Yeah, this is happening all the time.
Okay.
And so one of the particles. So this whole thing I said about neutrino flavors is that if everybody thinks back to their high school physics, you have like protons, neutrons, electrons. So they are like so you have protons, neutrons, electrons, and electron neutrinos. This is like the first generation of particles. Then there's another generation higher up in mass, which is almost like an equivalent, but it's like a higher mass version of everything else. And so what the problem is, is that the higher mass version of the electron, the muon, because it's again, it's just a generational thing. Its interaction strength with most material is very low, and so you get this high energy relativistic particle. Basically, some particles just traveling very close to the speed of light, which just passes like through the Earth. So if you're on the surface running one of these experiments, I think it's like basically for a square meter of area, you basically get 1 muon per second passing through. And so you can't run experiments where the dead time is dictated by these bloody muons passing through the experiment. You basically, but this data, any muons pass through, you see, and you can't use the data because it's garbage. It's not what you're looking for. So the only way that you can get away from that is to go underground or into a mountain. And so, yeah, you basically get these muons, which are all filtered out by the rock above.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, I know that's a very, very long answer, but it is
It's
to
just
shield.
Yeah, I was just going to say. So it just acts as a natural shield.
Yeah. And then there's other things you can do with the experiments to shield them more. Because the problem is, even though you shield even though you shield the muons, the muons still interact with the rock and they still produce other stuff. And the other stuff you have to shield against as well. But that's detector design. That's where you design parts of your detector in a certain way. Yeah. It's yeah, it's fun. Yeah, there's labs like it around the world, though. There's a few different places which have got a very similar thing. In the UK, there's a potash mine in Bulby, which have got a lab.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. So shout out to Sean Palin, who is the director there, who's cool. It's a cool guy. Yeah, and sorry.
I said hi, Sean.
Hi, Sean. Yeah, yeah, no, and yeah, so there's a whole bunch of labs around the world which have got the same sort of thing. There's one in Italy as well, Gran Sasso. People might remember it from the faster than light neutrinos scandal thing, which happened. That was at Gran Sasso, which was caused by a loose cable.
Wow, what a loose cable! So somebody tripped over the plug.
Yeah, it was literally like a GPS signal which was not plugged in correctly, and so it got this weird reflection, which made it look like, yeah. I think that's the version of the story I got told, but yeah, apparently it's loose. It was a loose connection. But yeah, so I'm.
I was gonna say, what's your position, your job?
Yeah, so I'm an experimental particle physicist, so I do lots of hands-on stuff. I do a bit of programming and simulation stuff, but it's very, very, very rare that I do that these days. I haven't done any real simulations and things for a few years. I try and do analysis when I can, but my main position, actually, my actual job title is detector manager. So I'm the detector manager of currently, anyway. This video might not date well. I don't know, but I'm detector manager of the Snow Plus experiment, which is basically the successor to Snow. We're looking at different physics, but it's basically my job to maintain the detector and produce high quality physics data. So yeah, we're basically running what is 1990s, late 90s electronics still.
Wow.
Keeping this stuff alive is really cool.
Still running Windows 98.
No, we're all on Linux. Yeah, it's all on Linux. But it's really interesting. Again, going back to like this kind of hands-on style electronics is like when you talk to like some of the other guests, like about their involvement, and like talk about how all the machines work, and they work in a certain way and with certain tricks you can do. What's interesting with this and electronics is that it's kind of cool. I think we've got to this point where so many detectors these days run on FPGAs. Basically, they run on this black box where, as a scientist, you don't really know what's going on. If something breaks, it just breaks, and that's, you just have to get a new piece of equipment. With this electronics which we use, it's like there is like one custom chip on it. There's one custom chip which was made at University of Penn, and the rest of it is like off the shelf electronics. And so there's so many of these problems which we've got with our electronics, where you can actually be like, scratch your head, okay, this thing is happening. What is broken on the board which can possibly cause this? And then it's like going onto your board and like desoldering a bunch of surface mount stuff and resoldering chips on and fixing stuff. So cool.
Yeah, certainly sounds it.
Yeah. But it's we're running. It's a running experiment. We are taking physics data these days. It's one of the, I'm not sure exactly how many physics experiments are currently running at Snolab, but it's one of the big ones. Got a huge detector. It's like a 12-meter acrylic sphere filled with a material which is very similar to mineral oil, but it produces light when particles pass through it. And right now we're basically looking at solar data and geophysics data. and in the future we will load it with a material, tellurium. Tellurium. Yeah, everybody knows of tellurium, which is in the capacitors and things. But no, that's tantalum. What do we use tellurium for? Anyway, whatever. You can see my brain doesn't work very well sometimes. But yeah, we're filling it with tellurium because, again, to go into the very, very fine details, tellurium performs this physics process, which can occur in two different ways. We know one of the ways, but this other way, best way I can put it, long story short, this other way is if it occurs, it will tell us something, quite profound and about the universe, and specifically the creation of the universe.
Oh, wow.
So
okay.
So
like
basically,
Big Bang type theory.
Yeah. So it all stems from the fact that, well, at least as particle physics models go, when you produce matter from energy, so I don't know, condense matter from energy, you have to produce equal amounts of matter and antimatter. And there are ways in which you can get more matter than antimatter, but the ways in which we know of currently from high energy physics experiments don't give you enough to get what we observe in the universe today. And so that's where neutrino physics comes in. That's where neutrino physics is the exciting part, because the neutrino sector is one area where, if we can prove that this particular rare event exists, it tells us something quite fundamental about matter and antimatter in the neutrino sector, and it allows for mechanisms by which we can totally produce everything which we see today. It's just that this event type is incredibly rare. So that's why most of these experiments are underground to shield backgrounds. They're designed in very specific ways. Yeah. Yeah.
To stop the resident cascade.
Yeah. We're going to push this to 110%. It's a bit of a gamble, but we need the resolution.
Oh, mate. It's been fantastic talking to you.
No, thanks. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. It's been brilliant. It really has.
Yeah, it's funny because I can always go on these like random rambles of trails of talking about stuff, and it's like, I mean, like the physics side of things. I think, I mean, just as a little final thing, I think physicists have this, scientists have this kind of weird thing where not many people have actually met an actual scientist, and I don't mean to disrespect my peers which work in different fields like biology and things, but when it comes to things like physics, nobody knows what that looks like. No. And so my joke is always, my joke is similar to the Gordon Freeman thing at the beginning. It's like a theoretical physicist typically spends most of their time in front of a computer. That's just the truth. It is just the truth. They don't wear lab coats. They'll wear shirts and t-shirts or whatever, and we'll sit at a desk and they'll mostly crunch numbers. It's what a theoretical physicist does. Whereas experimental physicist is more closer to an engineer. That's what you kind of look like to the outside. And also, like in movies and things, everybody's got this idea that we all walk around with lab coats and checkboards, right? And we're all like, oh, doctor, such and such, this thing is wrong with this thing. No, nobody ever refers to me as doctor, and if they did, I would probably tell them not to. The only time it ever happens is when you've got somebody who's trying to impress upon a student that they're not talking to another student.
Yeah, I've got you.
It's like, watch your tone, young man, or young lady. You're speaking to somebody who's got years of experience. Yeah,
that's just a respect thing, isn't it? I mean,
yeah. I mean, and so that's it's just like I say, it's one of those things. In many ways, it's like a bit of a curse. People might also say, well, you're a scientist, you must find most sci-fi incredibly annoying, and it's like, well, not really. Like I can turn off for about an hour before I start to get annoyed. But
Well,
but you know,
as
but
long as you know it's science fiction, then
yeah,
why not?
yeah. But I mean ultimately it's kind of cool. So the thing is exactly that. With being a scientist, I don't think you ever really turn off. That's the problem, and it's also it's good. I mean, I enjoy looking at the world through this weird vision of what's going on, but you don't really turn off, if that makes any sense. So it's like, yeah,
Rather than just accepting your thinking.
Yeah.
Well, why and why is that doing that? How's that working? Yeah,
Yeah.
I get what you mean. Yeah.
One of the problems is I mean, again, a lot of engineers and lots of people, tinkerers. I mean, like such as yourself, you also don't think you can't fix things, which is also a problem.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I can't fix things.
And then you then you have a go, don't you? And he's like, oh,
yeah, then you have a go and it
that.
breaks worse, you know. but yeah, and it's yeah, I don't know. If one example I was going to give is like, you know, with sci-fi is like the movie Interstellar. It's like there's so much in that movie which is bang on. But again, I think sometimes things are dumbed down for people in a way which shields against the things which are actually really cool. And so, for example, there's a part in Interstellar which is to do with the slingshot at the end that they do. And there's this like one line where they talk about, oh, they're going to do a subergosphere slingshot, and the physics behind that are absolutely insane. It's like it's completely insane, and the way that it's executed in the movie is perfect. But as a viewer, and if you don't know what we're doing, it's like, what? This doesn't make any sense. But it does. Like from the actual physics standpoint, it makes sense. The only thing which doesn't make sense in that movie is the fact that you've got a accreting black hole, which you want to be anywhere near. It would not be a good environment to live. It would be pretty bad. But yeah, and it's the same thing. It's like one of the things I mean I mentioned a few times. It's like I also like to write, and I've been writing like really poor sci-fi for years. And most of my problem is I get to a point where I'm actually trying to be too correct as far as I understand the physics with some of it, and I just get myself caught up. Just get myself really wrapped up in oh, what's possible, what's not possible, which bits of physics do I have to suspend. Yeah, it's a bit of a blessing and a curse. But yeah, thanks for not being too bored.
Oh, it's been fascinating, mate. It's been great. It's been great talking. I've been looking forward to this one. So
no,
all
thanks.
good, mate. It's good to see you looking well. Anyway, looking well.
Yeah, no, thanks. I'm just like looking myself at my own camera, thinking to myself, I don't look too tired today. If you caught me at the weekend, I was a mess.
Oh, yeah. We need to. You need to give you some dates on when we're going out exploring again.
Yeah, so no fixed dates, but I have generated enough funds. That's what I was doing this week. I've generated enough funds in game to buy the fuel, and so it's just about getting that fuel on board and then picking a date, and we can hop along.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I love the older exploration part of Elite. That's certainly my biggest draw to the game. It always has been.
Yeah, it is super good. It's and with Odyssey, it's just an extra little bit of icing on the cake. It's quite nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mate, cool. I'll let you go. And as I say, thanks again.
No.
And, I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, and I hope it turns out well.
I'm sure it will. See you later, mate.
Cheers.